Donald Trump has sort of been decomposing in front of our eyes for so long, it's hard to track the trajectory. I mean, he is, after all, the guy who talked about shining UV light inside people's orifices or alternately injecting bleach in order to cure them of COVID. He said that in public from the White House podium. I rewatched that clip today, and it drove home to me how all the stupidity, insanity, hostility of Donald Trump's term has been kind of sanded down to just goofy in a lot of people's remembrances. Today, in a column titled "Trump is Losing It," New York Times opinion columnist Jamelle Bouie compared Trump's feebleness to the breathless coverage of President Biden's age. Quote, Biden may be unable to do the job at some point in the future. Trump, it seems to me, already is. One of those is a lot more concerning than the other. And Jamelle Bouie, New York Times opinion columnist, joins me now. Jamelle, I liked your column, and one of the things, and this is a hobby horse of mine, so I'll just ride it for a moment, which is I do think that because people don't see him speak at length extemporaneously much anymore, they've lost sight of how completely incoherent he sounds when he does.
No, I think that's right. I think Trump's one of the great political advantages is that when he's out of public view, people just sort of like forget about him. Yeah. And everything they don't like about him is sort of not in their face. But if you just like watch his recent appearances at rallies, at public events and such, he's incoherent. And I believe it said in the column, he speaks in gibberish, and it's very striking to watch.
Yeah, say more about that, because he's always been sort of one for tangents, but it is notably harder to make your way through the logic of what he is saying than it was even a few years ago, I find.
I agree. There's one clip I watched of him attempting to explain a missile defense system, and he goes from sort of like a relatively cogent sort of like, we build these things for other countries into what took me a sec to really figure out what he was saying, like a description of how it works, but in sort of the kind of elliptical, nonsensical Trump fashion. It was very strange to watch. And I imagine I've been to my fair share of Trump rallies. I imagine that in the moment, especially if you're there as a supporter, it kind of just flies over you. But I have to imagine that someone who just doesn't really think much about Trump and you just plop them right there and you said, try to make sense of this, it would be hard. And certainly if the current president were sort of speaking in that manner, it would be a legitimate scandal.
There's also the fact that, again, there's always a certain amount of incoherence baked in, that it's hard to gauge over time. I mean, part of this because, look, when you look at Donald Trump from the 1990s, it's clear, right, that he's aged considerably. And that same is true of Joe Biden. When you look at Joe Biden as a senator, when he's 40 or 45, like, he's a much younger man and he speaks very differently, considerably. But Trump saying nonsense and incoherent things has been again, it's like so many things about him that seems baked in and thus unremarkable and then thus not a news story.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a real dynamic. That is the dynamic. And I find it troubling because, as you mentioned earlier, he was president.
Yes.
And it seems so strange to me that he has discussed so much coverage of him talks, like, essentially speculation. But no, he was president of the United States for 4 years. I remember it. I saw it. And his NATO riff over the weekend, that would be troubling even for just a candidate, but he was president and he should know, and treating it as if it's like, oh, that's just Trump, doing his thing. My view is, no, that's not just Trump doing his thing. That's the former president of the United States, demonstrating not even that he has like a difference of opinion with regards to NATO, but that he doesn't understand what the thing is.
Yes. I think at many basic levels, he does not understand the most basic things of health insurance, what Medicare is, the difference between Medicare and Medicaid, like basic things that you would expect a president. But we also saw, to me, the big thing that we've blocked out is COVID, because we saw how that lack of knowledge, curiosity, that incoherence all came together in the response, in the ludicrous things from the White House, the inability to actually process and make decisions about new information to a tangible effect in terms of how bad the response was. And again, that was where it all happened, and it all happened before us. But I do think people have blocked it out.
Trump has gotten some kind of COVID mulligan that, oh, that's just,
Yes.
who could have predicted the pandemic? But here's the thing. The job of the presidency is being prepared for crises. That's all it is, right? We judge presidents historically over how they handle crises. As you know, I'm someone who's very interested in 19th century history. The reason we think of James Buchanan as a failed president is because he was met with a crisis, mounting secession talk, and he failed to handle it or deal with it in a way that helped the country survive. Donald Trump faced a crisis, and that's the job. And he failed to handle it. And so it's strange that so many Americans, and I think a lot of coverage, has given him a mulligan as if it doesn't count. No, this is precisely the thing that counts the most.
I could not agree more about this. This is a recurring theme we actually talked about on my podcast, Why Is This Happening, this week with Eric Kleinenberg, who's got a new book out about that year, about 2020, revisiting it, which, again, people have blocked out for totally understandable reasons of emotional health. But speaking to that mulligan, I think it's really important to re-examine. Jamelle Bouie, thank you very much.